Welcome back. If you're returning to this channel, we're glad you're here. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome. We tell the stories that don't leave you easily, the ones that make you look a little differently at the world around you when the video ends. If that's the kind of content that stays with you, hit that subscribe button right now, turn on your notifications, and share this video with someone tonight. It costs nothing, and it means everything to this channel. Now, let's go back to Portland. There is a particular kind of neighborhood that exists in cities across America. Not wealthy, not struggling, just settled. The kind of place where the streets have names like Clover Mill Road and the trees are old enough to form a canopy over the sidewalk in summer. Where the same families have lived in the same units for years, where the woman in 2A knows the couple in 3C by their dog's name, where the trash gets taken out on Thursday nights like clockwork, because that's simply what you do here. Portland, Oregon has dozens of neighborhoods like this, and in the fall of 2021, Clover Mill Road was one of the quietest among them. People chose to live there deliberately. Teachers, nurses, remote workers, and young professionals who had grown tired of noise and wanted something that felt, for lack of a better word, human. The complex had a small courtyard where residents sometimes left garden chairs. There was a community bulletin board near the entrance that announced lost pets and upcoming building maintenance, and the occasional invitation to a potluck dinner. Crime did not belong in a place like this. Not in any real, immediate sense. The nearest serious incident anyone could recall had happened 3 years prior. A stolen bicycle, reported, never recovered, eventually forgotten. That was the scale of danger people here had calibrated themselves to expect. Nobody checked their mirrors in the parking lot. Nobody hesitated before holding the door open for a neighbor they recognized. Nobody lay awake at night wondering about the person in the unit beside them. That was the thing about Clover Mill Road. The danger didn't announce itself. It had already moved in, unpacked quietly, and learned the schedule of the woman next door before she ever learned his name. Mia Callahan had not missed a single day of school in 4 years without calling ahead first. Not once. Not during the winter, she caught pneumonia and taught 3 days of lessons from her couch over a video call rather than leave her class with a substitute. Not during the week. Her mother had surgery in Seattle, and she drove 4 hours each way on a Friday night, just to be back at her desk by Monday morning. Not ever, because that was simply who Mia was. Reliable, in the way that some people are reliable not out of obligation, but out of genuine love for what they do and who they do it for. So when her 4th grade class filed into room 114 at Elmwood Elementary on that Wednesday morning in October, and found a substitute teacher writing her name on the board in unfamiliar handwriting, the children noticed before any adult did. A girl named Sophie, who sat in the front row and had appointed herself an unofficial keeper of classroom routines, looked at the substitute and then at the door and then at the substitute again. She didn't say anything. She just opened her notebook and waited, the way children wait when something feels off, but they haven't yet found the words for it. By 9:15, the unease had spread to the staff lounge. Mia's colleague Dana Flores had texted her twice before the first bell and received nothing back. That alone was unusual. Mia was the kind of person who responded to messages within minutes, who never left people waiting and wondering. Dana told herself there was an explanation. A dead phone battery. A family emergency that had unfolded too fast for a proper notification. She told herself that right up until she mentioned it to the principal. Carol Briggs did not panic easily. 15 years running in elementary school had given her a finely tuned instinct for distinguishing genuine emergencies from everyday disruptions. But when Dana finished explaining, something in Carol's expression shifted. A small tightening around the eyes that her staff recognized as the look she got when something didn't add up. She called Mia's cell phone herself, straight to voicemail. She called again at 10:30, again at noon. Each time, the same recorded voice. The same silence waiting on the other side of it. By early afternoon, Carol Briggs was no longer telling herself there was a simple explanation. She was calling the police. Dana Flores didn't wait for the police to make the first move. During her lunch break, she drove the 4 minutes from Elmwood Elementary to Clover Mill Road with the quiet urgency of someone trying very hard to convince herself she was overreacting. She had rehearsed the scene in her head on the way over. Mia opening the door in pajamas, embarrassed, explaining that she had slept through her alarm and her phone had died, and everything was fine. Everything was perfectly fine. But when she turned onto Clover Mill Road, the rehearsed scene dissolved instantly. Mia's copper-colored Honda sat in its usual parking spot, exactly where it always was. Unmoved. Dana sat in her car for a long moment staring at it, engine idling, before she got out and walked to the apartment door. She knocked, waited, knocked again. Called Mia's name loud enough that she felt self-conscious about it. Pressed her ear briefly to the door and heard nothing. Not movement, not a television, not the particular quality of silence that suggests someone is simply ignoring a knock. Just stillness. She called the non-emergency police line from the parking lot, her voice steady, but her hands not entirely. The 2 officers who responded arrived within 20 minutes. They were calm, unhurried, professional. The kind of response a neighborhood like this warranted, where calls like this almost never led anywhere serious. The building manager arrived shortly after with a master key, and the door to Mia's apartment swung open for the first time since Tuesday night. What waited inside stopped everyone in the doorway for just a moment. The apartment looked the way a home looks when its owner fully intends to return. Not abandoned, paused. A stack of half-graded student worksheets on the coffee table, a red pen resting across the top sheet mid-correction, a ceramic mug on a coaster beside the couch, a cardigan folded neatly over the arm of a chair, her work bag hanging on its hook by the door, her keys on the kitchen counter, exactly where someone leaves keys when they aren't going anywhere. Her phone charger was still plugged into the wall beside her bed. The cable lay flat and empty. No phone. No Mia. No sign of where either had gone. One of the officers moved through the room slowly, opening doors, checking closets, saying nothing. The apartment gave nothing back, just that deep, unbroken quiet that had no reasonable explanation. The first officers on scene called it in before they finished the walkthrough. Something about the apartment didn't sit right. And Sergeant Paul Decker, 12 years on the force, and 6 of those responding to calls in missing persons cases, had learned a long time ago to trust that instinct before he could name it. The cleanliness bothered him. Not the ordinary tidiness of a neat person, but something underneath it. A quality to the stillness that felt less like calm and more like erasure. Detective Sandra Okafor arrived 40 minutes later. She moved through the apartment the way she always did on a first walk. Slowly, gloved, touching nothing, just looking. Building a mental map of every surface, every object, every small detail that either belonged or didn't. She had walked into hundreds of rooms in 15 years. She had learned that the most dangerous scenes weren't the chaotic ones. Overturned furniture, broken glass, obvious struggle. Those were almost easier. The dangerous scenes were the quiet ones. The ones that had been managed. This was a managed scene. She called for a forensics team without touching a single thing. They arrived within the hour and began their systematic sweep. Swabs, tape lifts, UV examination. The living area and kitchen yielded little. Whoever had been here had been thorough in those rooms. Surfaces wiped, nothing left on countertops or handles that shouldn't have been there. But the bedroom told a different story. Under UV light, the luminol bloomed across the lower half of the bedroom wall and a section of the hallway floor in pale, unmistakable patterns. Faint, deliberate. The kind of distribution that comes from careful cleaning rather than accidental transfer. Bleach had been used, applied with something absorbent, worked into the baseboard edges, the grout lines between the floor tiles, the underside of the door frame. This had not been done in panic. This had been done by someone who knew what investigators look for. Someone who had taken their time, moved methodically through the space, and left believing they had been thorough enough. They had been very nearly right. But very nearly in forensic work is the distance between walking free and a life sentence. Mia Callahan was formally declared a missing person at 6:47 that evening. Her apartment was sealed, taped, and reclassified before the last of the daylight left Clover Mill Road. Detective Okafor's team requested camera footage from every business, intersection, and residential camera within a half-mile radius of Clover Mill Road the morning after Mia was reported missing. It was painstaking work. Hours of footage reviewed frame by frame. Empty parking lots, passing headlights, the particular vacancy of residential streets between 2 and 4 in the morning when almost nothing moves, and what does tends to be unremarkable. A delivery truck making an early run, a lone jogger moving under street lamps, a cat crossing a driveway. Her analyst, a methodical young officer named Taurus, had been at it for 6 straight hours when he stopped the playback and leaned forward in his chair. He called Okafor over without saying what he had found. Just her name, quietly, and something in his tone that made her cross the room without finishing her sentence. The footage was from an ATM camera mounted on the exterior wall of a credit union on Millbrook Avenue, 2 blocks east of Clover Mill Road. Newer equipment, better resolution than most of what they had pulled from the area. The timestamp in the lower right corner read 3:07 a.m. A dark SUV was idling at the curb across the street from the machine. Engine running, no hazard lights, no movement for the first several seconds. Just a vehicle sitting in the amber wash of a street lamp with the particular stillness of something waiting. Then the driver's door opened. A figure stepped out onto the empty street. Gray hoodie, hood pulled forward, chin angled slightly downward. Not enough to suggest panic, more like the practiced awareness of someone who had thought carefully about angles and cameras without wanting to appear as though they had. The movement was controlled, unhurried. The body language of someone executing a plan rather than reacting to a crisis. The figure moved to the rear of the SUV and opened the hatch. Then came the moment that made Taurus stop the footage. From the curb, partially outside the camera's frame but visible enough, the figure lifted something, large, wrapped in what appeared to be dark plastic or heavy cloth. The effort required was visible in the set of the shoulders, the careful repositioning of the feet for leverage. Heavy. Awkward, the kind of weight that requires planning to move alone. It was loaded into the back of the SUV with slow, deliberate care. The hatch closed. The figure returned to the driver's seat. The SUV pulled away from the curb and disappeared out of frame within 90 seconds. The street returned to silence as if nothing had happened at all. Okafor straightened up and stood very still for a moment, eyes fixed on the frozen image of that empty curb. Then she told Taurus to find her those plates. The plates came back in under 4 minutes. A 2019 Ford Explorer, dark gray, registered to a Ryan Mercer at Unit 4B, Clover Mill Road. Okafor read the address twice. Then she set the paper down on the desk and looked at Taurus with the particular stillness of someone absorbing information that changes the shape of everything they thought they knew about a case. Unit 4B. Mia Callahan lived in Unit 4A. They had been separated by a single shared wall. She pulled Mercer's record immediately. 38 years old. IT contractor, worked remotely for a firm based out of Seattle. No prior arrests, no restraining orders filed against him. No flags of any kind in the system, not so much as an unpaid parking violation. On paper, Ryan Mercer was the kind of person investigators pass over because there is simply nothing there to catch on. Okafor and her partner drove to Clover Mill Road within the hour. He answered the door quickly. That was the first thing she noted, not nervously, not with the exaggerated casualness of someone who had been rehearsing, but quickly, as if he had been near the door already. He was average in almost every register. Medium height, medium build, the kind of face that a witness would struggle to describe in detail an hour after seeing it. He was dressed neatly. His apartment, visible through the open door behind him, looked immaculate. He offered them water. He answered questions in measured, complete sentences. He said he had been home all of Tuesday night. Said he hadn't heard anything unusual. Said he and Mia were friendly in the way neighbors are. Elevator nods, brief hallway exchanges, nothing beyond that. He said he hoped she was all right. He said all of it calmly, cooperatively, with the patient, slightly concerned expression of a man with nothing to hide. But Okafor had spent 15 years learning the distance between performance and truth. She watched his hands while he spoke. She watched the breath he took before answering certain questions. She watched what happened in his expression, just briefly, just at the edges, when she mentioned the SUV. Something moved behind his eyes, gone in an instant. But there, she thanked him for his time, shook his hand, walked back to the car at a measured, unhurried pace. Then she called the judge's office and asked for a warrant. The warrant was signed at 8:19 a.m. the following morning. 4 officers and Detective Okafor arrived at Unit 4B at 8:47. Ryan Mercer opened the door before the second knock. He was already dressed, already composed, already wearing the same cooperative expression he had offered them 2 days earlier, as if he had spent the intervening hours deciding that calm was his best remaining option and had committed to it completely. He stepped aside without being asked. The apartment stopped every officer in the first 30 seconds. Not because of what it contained, but because of what it projected. Immaculate was the only word for it. Every surface wiped clean, every object in its designated place, books aligned on shelves with their spines flush, the kitchen counters bare and gleaming, no dishes in the sink, no jackets thrown over chairs, no evidence of the ordinary accumulation of daily living that fills every home where a real person actually exists. It felt staged. It felt like a set. They moved through it methodically. Living area, kitchen, bathroom, each room offering the same pristine, carefully maintained blankness. One officer noted quietly that the cleaning had been recent, the sharp chemical undertone still faintly present beneath the surface smell of the apartment. The bedroom closet was built in, floor to ceiling, spanning the full length of the wall. An officer slid the panels aside one by one. Clothing arranged by type and color, shoes paired precisely on the lower rack. Everything exactly where it should be. Until the last panel. Behind a heavy winter coat pushed deliberately to one side was a door, narrow, fitted flush with the wall behind it, the edges barely visible. The kind of modification that required planning, tools, and time. Okafor pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was small, barely 8 feet by 6, but every inch of available wall space had been used. Printed photographs covered the surface from shoulder height to ceiling, dozens of them, arranged with the same obsessive precision as the rest of the apartment. Mia leaving for her morning run. Mia in the parking lot. Mia at her kitchen window, unaware. Taken over months, through a telephoto lens, from an angle that could only have been his bedroom window. Beside the photographs, handwritten schedules, her departure times, her return times, her routines mapped to the minute. A city map on the far wall, her routes traced in red. And on the desk a journal, worn at the corners, pages filled completely in small, dense handwriting. Okafor stood in the center of that room and didn't speak for a long moment. Outside, she could hear one of the officers informing Ryan Mercer that he was under arrest. Ryan Mercer was handcuffed in the hallway of his own apartment at 9:23 a.m. and walked to a waiting patrol car without a word. No protest, no performance of innocence, no demand for an explanation. He already knew better than anyone in that building. He moved through the process with the same measured composure that had defined every interaction since detectives first appeared at his door. As if he had mentally arrived at this moment, long before it physically occurred, and had made whatever private peace with it he needed to make. The patrol car pulled away from Clovermill Road as residents began appearing in doorways and parking lot edges, drawn out by the presence of multiple police vehicles and the particular electricity that moves through a building when something serious has finally broken the surface. People who had nodded at Ryan Mercer in the mailroom, people who had held the elevator door for him, people who had registered him as background, safe, unremarkable, simply there. They stood in small clusters and said very little. The trial began in the spring. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They opened with the ATM footage, playing it for the jury in full, then frame by frame, establishing the timeline and the vehicle before introducing the registration. They followed with the forensic evidence from Mia's apartment, presenting the luminol results alongside expert testimony that walked the jury carefully through what the patterns indicated and what level of deliberate effort the cleaning would have required. Then came the hidden room. Photographs of its contents were entered into evidence one by one. The printed surveillance photographs of Mia taken over 19 months, the handwritten schedules, the annotated city map, the journal, its entries read selectively into the record by the lead prosecutor in a courtroom that grew progressively and completely silent as the words filled the air. Each piece of evidence built on the last, not just establishing what Ryan Mercer had done, but constructing the full architecture of how long he had been doing it and how carefully he had planned every stage of it. Mia's mother sat in the front row every day of the trial, straight-backed, present, unflinching. Those who sat near her said she never looked away from the evidence, never covered her eyes. She was there for every word. The defense offered character witnesses and challenged the footage quality. The jury listened politely to all of it. Then they deliberated for 3 hours and 12 minutes. Guilty on all counts. The foreperson's voice was steady when she delivered it, but the word landed in that courtroom with a weight that no one who was present would forget. Several members of the gallery exhaled audibly. One of Mia's colleagues from Elmwood Elementary pressed her hand over her mouth. Mia's mother sat perfectly still, eyes forward, and did not move for a long moment after the verdict was read. She had waited for this. She had sat through every photograph, every forensic report, every clinical recounting of what her daughter's final hours had looked like, and she had not looked away from a single word of it. This moment belonged to her, to Mia, and she received it in silence, with a dignity that everyone in that room recognized and remembered. Ryan Mercer was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was led out of the courtroom the same way he had done everything, quietly, without expression, without giving the people whose lives he had destroyed even the small satisfaction of visible remorse. Clover Mill Road changed after that. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the small permanent ways that trauma reshapes ordinary life. Deadbolts checked twice, curtains drawn a little earlier. The easy, unthinking trust that once made that street feel like a community replaced by something more guarded. A new awareness that proximity is not the same as safety, that familiarity is not the same as knowledge, that the person whose face you recognize is not necessarily the person you know. At Elmwood Elementary, Room 114 was quietly renamed in Mia's honor. Her students, older now, carrying the memory of a teacher who never came back, grew up shaped by her presence and by her absence in equal measure. Carol Briggs kept her photograph on the desk. The school held a small remembrance each October. On the anniversary of the week, everything changed. Mia Callahan deserved more than to be remembered as a case. She was a teacher, a daughter, a neighbor, a person who made the world around her measurably warmer just by being in it. That is her legacy, not his name, hers. If this story moved you, if it made you hold someone a little closer tonight, please take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every share helps these stories reach the people they're meant to reach. We'll be back soon with another story that deserves to be told. Stay aware, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.